Well, right now we're standing on what used to be the Great Sauk Prairie. 14,000 acres of land, one of the largest prairies in southern Wisconsin, right behind us. And why was this prairie? Is because the glacier stopped right here, right in front of me as a hill, and that's the terminal moraine from the last glacier. And as that was melting, all of this outwash plain was filled with sand and gravels, and eventually, as the wind blew, heavy silts. And that was colonized as the climate warmed by native prairie. So ultimately, about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, this whole area was an extensive native tall grass prairie with almost no trees in it. Well, this is the landscape that the Ho-Chunk Indians inhabited, and their ancestors before them, the mound builders and others, inhabited this area. They hunted, they did modest agriculture out here. It was banked up against the Baraboo Hills to the north, where there were elk and wildlife, and some of those came out here into the plain. So it was an abundant and rich landscape for the Native Americans. They were here until European settlement, and some really bad treaties kicked the Ho-Chunk people off their land, routed them out of here, and it opened this landscape for European settlement in the 1840s. And the Europeans came in, and with ox and plow, they turned this rich prairie soil into some of the best agricultural land in southern Wisconsin, because it was deep and thick and rich prairie soil, hard to break, but once it was broken, it was very rich and very, very good for agriculture. So those European farmers, Germans and Yanks as they were called, the people coming from the East Coast emigrating into this area, had 100 years of prosperous agricultural activity until 1941-42, when World War II broke out. The Army had been looking for a place to build a very large ammunition plant, and lo and behold, they chose the Sauk Prairie community. So in January of 1942, right after Pearl Harbor of December 41, the Army knocked on the doors of essentially 80 farm families and kicked them out within 2 months. They had to leave their farm, they had to take their animals, their whatever they had harvested that year. They had to take all of their personal belongings, their family, and leave their farmsteads. So the entire Sauk Prairie community was abandoned. And in 1942, the Army came in and began very earnestly constructing a 7,400-acre military facility that was for the production of propellants during World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam War. So from 1942 until 1975, it was an ammunition plant. They were producing propellants. It was a chemistry factory, basically. A lot of explosive or very flammable products were produced here. And there were 1,400 buildings, over 100 miles of roads, dozens of miles of rail out here, and we're standing on one of those old rail lines that came through the Badger property that was hauling materials in and hauling finished product out. Today the landscape is completely different. The Army left in 1997. There was a process for discussing what's going to happen with this land, and an idea that our organization, the Sauk Prairie Conservation Alliance, came up with, along with a lot of members of the community, was re-greening this landscape. Try and bring back the original Sauk Prairie in some semblance. And so that was our original vision. We talked about, and the idea caught on, is reclaiming or restoring the original Sauk Prairie. So in 2001, this idea to basically restore the land and keep it a green space was accepted by all of the decision makers. The land was parsed out between 3 major landowners, the Ho-Chunk Nation, which owns the land directly behind me, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to the east of where I'm standing, and then to the south of here, the Dairy Forage Research Center, which is a USDA or federal government agency, has 2,000 acres. So all combined, it's 7,400 acres of open space. So we're really celebrating a transformation of what was an Army facility now into a green space. And this restoring green space, it will be a very, very large native prairie landscape, will be the largest grassland in southern Wisconsin, home to some of the rarest birds and wildlife and plants in the state of Wisconsin, because our native prairie species, both the plants and the organisms that were found in the original prairie, are all but gone. But this will attract the grassland birds back that have been on the verge of extirpation here in Wisconsin due to the conversion of the grasslands and the meadows into corn and soybean fields. So it's a full circle. This area behind me started out as the Great Sauk Prairie, and it went through 100 years of agriculture, 75 years of military use, and I would say abuse, because the land was not cared for. And now the land is resorting back to nature. It's pretty wild. There are a lot of great things to see out here, wonderful birds in the summertime, sandhill cranes flying over. There's a pair of nesting eagles out here on the property. There are lovely singing birds along the trail. You see butterflies and pollinators of all sorts as you come up through here in the summer. As I come up from Prairie to Sauk on my bike and I look at this great open plain, I say, this is reminiscent of the Serengeti. It feels like the Serengeti of Wisconsin when I'm out here. So it's really a spectacular landscape. We're really grateful to Sauk County for putting up so many resources and having so much imagination in creating this Great Sauk Trail out here from this old railroad bed. And my hat's off to Marty Krieger, who has really helped to pioneer this Great Sauk Trail concept out here, and encouraged citizens of the community and private citizens to think about and contribute to this wonderful project. I'm happy to have been a part of it. Our organization and I personally was involved in helping develop and design the interpretive signs that are found out here at Badger. There are 10 interpretive signs that have been put up for people's pleasure and learning opportunity, talking about wildlife, talking about the grassland ecosystem, talking about the Ho-Chunk Nation, the history of Badger, geologic features, and otherwise. And it's just a world-class biking and hiking experience, and I hope everybody gets a chance to come out here and see this spectacular resource.